Welcome back to Zenith Poker. Today we're going to be discussing a hand played by Pluribus, the poker AI created by Carnegie Mellon University. This hand was played between Pluribus on the button and Mr. Pink in the big blind. It folds to Pluribus on the button with ace of diamonds, four of hearts, and Pluribus opens to 2.5 big blinds. The small blind folds and Mr. Pink in the big blind calls with king of diamonds, nine of diamonds. The flop is 6 of hearts, 9 of clubs, 3 of diamonds. Mr. Pink checks and Pluribus bets 11 big blinds or twice the pot. Mr. Pink calls and we see a turn which is the 2 of diamonds. Mr. Pink checks and Pluribus bets 27.5 big blinds or full pot bet. Mr. Pink continues with his top pair, second kicker and the flush draw, and the river is the 2 of spades. Mr. Pink checks and Pluribus checks behind. Now this is quite an interesting hand for a few reasons. First off, if we look at the flop, Pluribus goes for a flop overbet, and flop overbets are uncommon in human play. Often humans will prefer to bet something between half the pot and the pot. But here, with the advent of these strong AIs like Pluribus, Libratus, and solvers, flop overbetting has become a much more common and accepted way of playing. And specific types of flops are overbet more frequently than others. Let's have a look at a simulation that was run using GTO+. We can have a look at the preflop ranges. So here, the out of position player is Mr. Pink, and this is the preflop range which I have assigned him. And remember that these preflop ranges are just estimates, but from these estimates we can get some idea of what's happening in terms of the GTO play. So we can see out of this preflop range, the big blind doesn't have jacks or stronger. The big blind doesn't have ace king and ace queen suited, king queen suited, or jack or ace jack suited, because those hands are 3-bet all of the time. Additionally, pocket tens is 3-bet at 75% frequency and called at 25% frequency, and these middling pocket pairs, 7s to 9s, 3-bet half the time. And there are some other suited hands which are 3-bet. So here these suited connectors, king jack suited, are 3-bet at a 75% frequency. And these suited gappers are 3-bet half the time. There's also ace queen and king queen that are 3-bet at 25% frequency or called at 75% frequency. You can see that the calling range has a lot of offsuit hands such as ace high and king high, as well as some offsuit connected hands. Moving over to the buttons range, for Pluribus, I've assigned a 44.1% opening range. This includes almost all of the ace X, with the weakest ace X offsuit being ace 3 offsuit at 25% frequency, some offsuit kings, king 8 offsuit, king 7 offsuit, and king 6 offsuit at reduced frequencies. The suited queens, jacks, and tens at reduced frequency, and some of the suited gap hands at reduced frequency. As for the tree, this is quite a large tree, so the setup for this is overall 132 gigabyte tree, which is quite large. On the flop, I've given Pluribus 4 bet sizes. I've given Mr. Pink, who is the big blind, no donking strategy. That's to reduce the amount of memory needed for the tree. but it's quite likely that there wouldn't be a donking strategy for Mr. Pink anyway on this board. And we'll see why that's the case shortly. So the 4-bet sizes on the flop that I've given Pluribus is 25%, 50%, 100%, and 200%. Pluribus itself actually wasn't given a 25% bet size, but I've added that in just for a bit of completeness. For Mr. Pink, I've given a 50 and 100% check raise size, and for Pluribus, a 50 and 100% 3-bet size. Additionally, for both players throughout the entire tree, I've given a 10x pot all in. So when the stack size is less than 10 times the pot, an all in bet size is added. It's not necessarily used, but it's added there for completeness. Moving on to the turn and the river. For both players, I've given 5 bet sizes as the first bet. I've given 25, 50, 100, 150, and 250. And that's for both players, for both the turn and the river. And I've also given check raise and 3-bet sizes of 50% and 100%. And on the river, I've given an additional 200% check raise for both players. That's 200% check raise for out of position and 200% raise for in position. So it's quite a large tree. And because of that, we can get a decent idea about what's going on. So pretty standard way of setting up. So 5.5 starting pot with the effective stack of 97.5 big blinds. This game was unraked, so we've got 0% rake. And this was ran to a 0.5% exploitability, which is reasonable for a single raise pot. So let's have a look at the strategy for Pluribus here on the button. So if we can see that Pluribus, out of the 4-bet sizes, is overall betting a little bit more than 60% of the time, with a checking range of 38.8%. Out of the bet sizes, Pluribus chooses a half-pot bet size 35.2% of the time, and the twice-pot bet size 26.0% of the time. And the other bet sizes that I've given Pluribus weren't chosen. Now, on the boards like this, the 9-6-3, if we look at the pre-flop ranges, right, so here if we look at out of positions range and analyze it a bit further, we can see that from pre-flop, out of position doesn't have 9-6 off, 9-3 offsuit, or 6-3 offsuit, or at least they shouldn't have it at a high frequency. And because of that, Mr. Pink here as the big blind won't have that many 2 pairs in their range. If you look at the breakdown, we can see that the out of position player, Mr. Pink, has 1.09% sets, 0.97% 2 pair, and 0.24% of overpairs. So because of that, Mr. Pink here is actually quite capped. So in terms of hands that are stronger than top pair, top kicker, Mr. Pink only has between 2 and 2.5% of those kinds of hands in his range. Knowing that Mr. Pink here is quite capped on this board, when Pluribus has a strong hand, such as an overpair or top pair, top kicker, Pluribus can press the advantage in relative range strength by making quite a large bet. So here, for example, pocket tens for Pluribus has between 79 and 80% equity, but in terms of the relative hand strength in Mr. Pink's range, pocket tens is quite near the top. So if we find pocket tens and ace 9 in Mr. Pink's range, we see that the pocket tens and ace 9 are quite close to the 97th percentile in terms of the strength of the hand in the range. So for Pluribus, who has ace 9, pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket queens, aces and kings, those hands all represent the 97th percentile in Mr. Pink's range. But with the equity of only 80% here with pocket tens, we see a quite substantial difference between the amount of equity that the hand has and its relative rank in the range. And part of that is due to the ability for some of Mr. Pink's overcard type hands to outdraw pocket tens. And additionally, a hand that makes a single pair on this board also has 5 outs to outdraw the pocket tens. So because of that, Pluribus can put in an overbet on the flop. And if we look at the overbetting range in more detail, the overbetting range is quite polar. We can see that it's got some very strong hands, such as top pair and good kicker, overpairs, some two pairs and some sets, and those all represent the value portion of the overbetting range, while the bluffing portion is some weaker hands, some middle and third pairs are necessary in the event that those cards pair the board on the turn. But many of the bluffs include overcard or straight draws and backdoor flush draws. So going back to the hand, here Pluribus chose to overbet the ace of diamonds, 4 of hearts, and Mr. Pink called. So we'll have a look to see if this is a reasonable play for both players. Looking back at our solution, if we look at the ace of diamonds, 4 of hearts, we can see that it itself is overbet 11.8% of the time. Now when Pluribus overbets this hand, Pluribus is turning this hand into a bluff. It might have some showdown value now, but the benefit of overbetting is that it can get Mr. Pink to fold out some stronger ace highs, as well as some of the weakest pairs, while also fold out some weaker hands with a lot of equity against ace high, such as a 2 overcard type hand. And so when you get to the turn and an ace comes or a 4 comes, if an ace comes, then Pluribus then has a good top pair that is unopposed by that many top pair hands in Mr. Pink's range. And when a 4 comes, it picks up some additional showdown to beat the 3. In addition, there are some backdoor draws, such as a 5, a 7, or a 2, which can bring a straight draw for the ace 4. So against this overbet, we see that the solver is folding almost all of the ace highs, with the exception of some of the strongest ace highs such as ace queen and ace jack, and ace 10 with a backdoor flush draw. Additionally, the solver is folding many of the overcard hands, with the exception of some of the strongest overcard hands, to mention king queen offsuit, king jack, and queen jack suited with the backdoor flush draw. Besides folding those weaker hands, the solver also chooses to fold some of the weaker pairs, namely the pocket pairs and the weaker pairs without as much backdoor potential. So here, for example, we see that ace 3 offsuit, bottom pair top kicker, is always folded, but 10-3 suited with the backdoor flush draw is called in preference. The majority of the top pairs are continued, especially top pair with a kicker that's higher than the 9, and some top pairs with backdoor potential, such as a 9-2 suited with a backdoor flush draw. Mr. Pink's king 9 of diamonds is called at a 100% frequency. Moving on to the turn, Mr. Pink checks and Pluribus bets 100% of the pot, and then Mr. Pink calls. Looking at our solution, we can see that the 2 of diamonds is a reasonably good card for the out of position player, This is because Pluribus's bluffing range on the flop contains many of the overcards to the board. And on the other hand, Mr. Pink's calling range does not contain as many of those overcards. So when a undercard to the board comes, such as the 2 of diamonds, this is actually quite a good card for Mr. Pink, and Mr. Pink can develop a leading range. Here we see in this solution a leading range of roughly 16.7%, and the quarter pot bet size is used. So Mr. Pink checks, and here we have the solver strategy for Pluribus. Pluribus is betting a little under half the time, which is what we would expect from the 50% rule. And this betting range contains 2 bet sizes, one here a full pot bet and one the half pot bet. Obviously we're limited due to RAM constraints, so if additional bet sizes were missed, I apologize for that. If we look a bit deeper at the pot size bet option, we can see that is more polar than on the flop and has fewer bluffs than on the flop. So the value range for this bet size contains many of the top pairs, particularly the strongest top pair, as well as many overpairs. And as bluffs, there are some of the ace highs with a gut shot, and as well as some overcard type hands, such as the Jack 10 offsuit, or hands with a gut shot like Jack 5 suited and Queen 4 suited, both having a gut shot as well as an overcard. Against the pot size bet on the turn, here we can have a look at how the solver would have played in Mr. Pink's position. The solver would have gone all in with many of the strong hands, such as the lower sets, pocket 3s and pocket 6s, and many of the 2 pairs, such as 6-3 and 6-2 suited and 9-3 suited. But the solver continues to trap pocket 9s. And here the solver would fold some of the King 9 offsuit and King 9 suited hands without a flush draw, but always continues with King 9 of diamonds. Moving on to the river. The river is the 2 of spades. Mr. Pink checks, and Pluribus checks behind. And this is quite a disciplined check by Pluribus. Many players here might decide to try to continue bluffing and bet all in to try and win the pot. But we know that Pluribus is quite balanced, and because of that balance, will have to give up some of his bluffs on the river and continue bluffing at a lower frequency than on the previous street. Looking back at the solver solution, Mr. Pink correctly checks the King 9 as the solver here checks the entire range. Looking at the triple barrel strategy for the solver, we see that the betting range is only for an all-in size, almost 3/4 of the pot. And the weakest hand for value is top pair, top kicker. And the solver is quite selective when deciding which bluffs to use. Overall, the best bluffs to choose would be ones that have good blockers, particularly blockers to hands that will always call, such as the straight 5-4. So looking again at the ace-4 offsuits, we see that there is a decision here for the solver to pick which ones to bet. And here the solver has decided to check back some of them and bet all in with others. And this decision has got to do with the blockers that are chosen. In particular, the ace of diamonds will block some of the missed flush draws that will fold to the river all in. So here in particular, ace of diamonds, 7 of diamonds, ace of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, ace 6 of diamonds, ace of diamonds, 6 of clubs, and some ace 10 of diamonds. All of those hands will fold at a reasonably high frequency, and blocking those hands makes for an ineffective bluff. On the other hand, if we reverse the suits, so if we look at ace of hearts, 4 of diamonds, we can see out of the calling and folding ranges, the 4 of diamonds blocks some of the 5-4 suited and offsuit, and the ace of spades will block some of the ace-9. So here, Pluribus has correctly evaluated that bluffing with the ace of diamonds is slightly ineffective because the ace of diamonds blocks some of the hands that Mr. Pink would fold and unblocks some of the hands that Mr. Pink would call. If you would like to get access to this simulation, I will leave a link in the description below. That's the end of this video. Thank you for watching.